Hey guys, Yoshi here, and in today's video I'm going to be covering the last part of my exotic armor tier list guide, and this will be covering the Titan armor. Put this last because I don't really play Titan that much. Honestly, only made a Titan because when Xur sold One-Eyed Mask for the first time, that's when I made my Titan so I could buy it from Xur and use it. Not really a fan of Titans, even though I have been messing around with them more. They do have very strong PvP exotics, I believe, but I just personally don't play Titan a lot, so you might see a lot of unfavorable tier ratings for the armor pieces. I'm probably gonna revisit this class, so don't just look at some of these things and immediately dismiss the tiers. I just personally do not like Titan, and I just haven't really played a lot with Titan class, so just take these tier list portions at a very low value. I'm not sure what I'm trying to say here. It's just like these are these values are probably not the best representation of some of the armor pieces. But anyways, let's get right into it. First up, we have an insubordinable skull fort. I always say that first part right, so please bear with me. For PvP, I gave it an A tier, and PvE, I also give it an A tier. Reason being is pretty much you can have constant uptime for your melee kills, especially for the shoulder charge ability, the arc shoulder charge ability. It's I know it's kind of gimmicky because you have to be using the shoulder charge, but it's very effective and very annoying to play against, especially people who do not like playing against people who shoulder charge. It can be very fun to use. Definitely recommend it for lower lower skilled PvP players who aren't able to get a lot of kills effectively with their weapons. If you need to kind of crutch on your abilities to help you get kills, definitely check out this exotic. Can be very helpful in both PvP and PvE activities. Definitely worth giving it a try. Next up, we have Mask of the Quiet One. What it does is that when you're critical health, it will heal on kills and you gain ability damage when you're critical. However, it's only when you're critical that you have the chance, or not the chance, where you heal and kill and gain ability damage. I definitely think it has a lot of potential because of the healing aspect and the ability buff damage buffing. However, personally, I have never really used this exotic. And also the reason I give it such a low rating is because personally I haven't seen other Titans use this exotic a lot. I've seen people talk about it, but I just haven't seen people use it, which makes me just leave it at a C tier. I don't know if it's super good, but I don't know if it's like super trash, so that's why it's at the C tier rating. For PvE, definitely can be helpful, kind of like with the Hunter thing and Wormhusk. If you're in a pinch, a sticky situation, you need to get some health back. Well, you're probably already critical health. You get a kill on like a red bar, like a thrall or something like that, and you get your health back and you have increased ability damage, which allows you to get out of that sticky situation, which is a thing that can be helpful for PvP. But if you're already low health, you might you you're probably already gonna be dead in PvP if you're low health, or you're gonna be hiding. You're not gonna be still challenging. So it's just maybe I need to reevaluate the exotic, but my perspective is if you're low health, you're probably hiding and not still trying to go for the kill in PvP, and then PvE, it's just situational. Next up, we have Kefri's Horn. Gave it a D in PvP and a PvE F in PvE. Reason being, I think it's kind of a gimmick slash meme exotic. I have used this exotic before. It is fun to use, especially catching people off guard when your barricade releases like a blast of like thermite wave damage. And then with the constant, if you have strength at 100, you can have constant uptime of your barricades, and you can be constantly ass blasting people with this exotic. However, it's too gimmicky where you have to put yourself in a position where you pretty much would have gotten the kill with a shotgun at that point. Like how close you have to get to someone to make this exotics perk effective against people. And most of the time, also with barricades, it's like normally you're like giving yourself like a fake wall, if you will, or you're giving yourself vision over an area, or you're blocking like a doorway. Normally, you're not getting into someone's face and using this thing as a means of killing them. So it's more of a meme exotic for me for PvP. It has some potential if you can play around its gimmickness. However, it's just not a very strong exotic. And definitely a no for me in PvE. I don't really see how getting kills with I don't think you can even get like kills except for on like very weak enemies in PvE. Next up, we have Helm of Saint 14. For PvP, I gave it a B+, and for PvE, I gave it an S. Reason being, kind of suffers the same effect as Guizen Vest. For PvP at least, it's only useful if you're running bubble. Um, getting the overshield giving the overshield for yourself and for your teammates when they pass through the bubble can be very helpful. Gives them an extra 100 health. Also, any enemies that enter your bubble will become disorientated, so makes for more effective easy kills. Make sure they don't get away with any like supers or anything like that. For PvE, I feel like it's almost a must-have if you're running bubble. Maybe there are some other exotics you could argue that might be better for bubble, but I do believe having the overshield and making it so that enemies are disorientated when they come into your bubble are very helpful perks of this exotic, especially when you're running bubble. Next up, we have Eternal Warrior. For PvP, I gave it an F, and PvE, I gave it an F. My note, yeah, better exotics exist. The overshield, my opinion, just goes away way too quickly. And it's only available when you pop your super. So pretty much the entire time you're wearing this exotic, it's effectively useless. Even if you were to switch to the exotic before you pop your super, I really think it's not worth it. You're probably better off taking another exotic over Eternal Warrior. I mean, yeah, it might save you from getting insta headshotted, but you get tagged once, your overshield's already gone, and then you're on normal health, and then it's just like you're, it's just the same as popping your normal super. You get like an extra 100 health, but really I don't think it helps you all too much. And you really don't need the overshield in PvE. I think that's pretty explanatory. One-Eyed Mask, PvP, I have it as an A tier, and PvE, I have it as a C tier. I know it got the nerf and it no longer has the bonus damage after kill, and you don't have the OP wall hacks like you did before. Now it's a highlight and it just heals you. Even though it's been nerfed and nerfed like this, I still believe it's a very strong exotic, especially since it heals you. I think any exotic that heals is just very strong in PvP, especially if you're in a pinch and you really need that health. And this, all it does is like as soon as someone like tags you, like they shoot you in the toe or something like that, the exotic perk procs, it will highlight that enemy, albeit not as easy to well, it's still relatively easy to locate where this person is. You can't see them through walls anymore, but you still can see them when they're in view. You get the kill. I think you get the overshield now. They reverted it. Before they like gave it like a weird nerf slash buff where it would like heal you but not give you the overshield. Now it's back to giving you the overshield. Getting 300 health just from getting a kill is pretty freaking good. And then PvE, I don't think it's as useful anymore, especially because it doesn't buff your damage. And since the damage buff is gone, I've dropped it down to a C tier. I mean, it's probably still effective because you can get the healing and the overshield, but I just don't think it's as good for PvE as it used to be. Next up, we have ACD/0 feedback fence. For PvP, I gave it a B+, and PvE, I gave it a D. Reason being that kind of gimmicky, but it can bail you out of certain situations. I have been killed by feedback fence uh, while playing on my Warlock Hunter and my Titan while punching Titans wearing feedback fence. It can, it definitely can save you in PvP and certain melee fights, but it requires, people to punch you and for you to have it charged up. So it just you have to be keeping in mind that you gotta proc the perk and you gotta get people to punch you. And if people aren't punching you a lot in a lobby, it can be wasted. You're probably not gonna see a lot of results from feedback fence in PvP. So but it's definitely not like a terrible exotic. It's definitely a good exotic if you don't have any of these other exotics available to you in PvP. It's definitely an okay exotic to be wearing. Don't Nothing to be ashamed of or anything like that. And PvE, D tier, better exotics exist for PvE. It's not complete crap because maybe it can save you against like melee ads, but it's not like something I would wear or recommend other Titan players to wear when they're playing PvE. Next up, we have Doomfang Pauldron. For PvP, I gave it a B tier, and for PvE, I gave it a B plus. And my note is it can allow you to get very fast supers. If you pair it with Monte Carlo gives you your melee back. And if you play bottom tree Void as Titan, anytime you get the shoulder charge or whatever with Doomfangs on with the bottom tree Void as Titan, you get like 1/4 of your super, I think, in PvP. And if you're using Monte Carlo, you have a chance on Monte Carlo kills to get back your melee energy or completely get back your melee. Go for another melee. Now you're at, you know, half of your super back if you get another shoulder charge kill with New Fangs on. It's it can be very good for getting like a 4 kill super, essentially. It's not as strong as it sounds because Monte Carlo did receive a nerf to how its perk works in PvP, so it's not a guaranteed melee charge back when you get a kill with Monte Carlo. But it definitely has some potential, and it's a very fun exotic type of playstyle to play around. It's very fun for sure. And then again for PvE, having fast supers is very beneficial. I don't think I have to go too in depth there. Next up, we have Synthoceps. For PvP, I give it an S tier, and for PvE, I give it an A tier. I think the best pairing for Synthoceps is taking Middle Tree Arc. So when you do the jumping melee and you come crashing down into some enemies in PvP, if you have the perk on Synthoceps procced, it will kill pretty much everyone that's affected by the melee attack. And in most situations, if you are surrounded, you have the Synthoceps perk proc. It will do bonus damage when you're punching people. And as a Titan, your punches are pretty effective in PvP, similar to Hunter, but unlike Warlocks, unfortunately. Um, Definitely is a good exotic for punching things. It's definitely not something to shrug off. For PvE, give it an A tier. Can definitely help maybe with like 1-2 punching, 1-2 punch shotguns, stuff like that when you're surrounded at least. But it's to me it's not like a must pick for PvE. I feel like there are slightly better exotics available, but it is a top tier exotic for PvE. Next up, we have Aeon Safe. You can already see my thing, Aeon, more like Aoff, XD. Uh, you get the point here with the other Aeons, as I mentioned in the Hunter and the Warlock guides. They're just useless unless 6 people are wearing them. And I think for Titans, it's like for your melee, I mean, it could be good, but you need 6 people wearing them. Next up, we have Ashen Wake. For PvP, I give it a B tier, and for PvE, I give it a C tier. Might have to go back and play around with it a little bit more, but you have the potential when playing mid-tree solar for one-shot fusion nades. So, and you get your fusion nades back after you get a kill, so you can just keep chaining one-shot fusion nade kills if you're good at using the fusion nades to kill people, if you're good at aiming grenades, and you're good at maintaining your roaring flames buff from the middle tree solar. Definitely has potential. For PvE, not so much. It doesn't feel like the grenades do as much damage in PvE. I might have to go back and do some testing. For me, when I was playing around with them, it just didn't feel like the fusions were that great in PvE. Definitely want to take some other exotics over this one. Next up, we have Worm God Caress. I can't comfortably make or give this armor piece like a tier right now. The old one I gave it was C and C, but that's before people realized the potential you could have with Middle Tree Solar, I believe, and getting like 300,000 damage melees. I'm gonna have to revisit this because it's been banned for like an entire freaking season, so no one's been able to use it. I think in PvE definitely has incredibly high potential. Same with PvP, it's sort of like Synthoceps, but I haven't been able to use it because it's been banned. And the reason it's been banned it's because it's been glitched. The melee perk of the exotic has been bugged for like 2 seasons now. I mean, they fixed it in the previous season and then they broke it. Someone found it was bugged again. Then they removed it or like banned it from the game essentially. And then they brought it back, but I haven't been able to use it, so I have no idea the potential of this exotic, but I have seen posts on Raid Secrets that Worm God Caress is still very good for PvE, so I'm definitely don't take this as a C. It's probably more like a S tier if you know how to combine the perks of the exotic with your subclasses. Next up, we have Ursa Furiosa. For PvP, I gave it an F, and PvE, I gave it an F. Reason being, it's not so good anymore. You used to be able to get pretty much all of your super back when using this in PvP if guarding with the Void Shield. Now, I don't think you can get it back, or it's diminishing returns, so you can get maybe like 3/4 back or something like that. I don't think shielding is that great in PvP because I mean, as you move on, you'll find players are more able to deal with stuff like that. But it can have potential because people don't, lower mid-tier players might not know how to play around someone who's shielding. And it could be good for like guarding your teammates from supers and stuff like that. But I don't see a lot of people using it. And personally, I don't use it either. So that's why it's F tier. And then PvE, I mean, I don't use it in PvE. I don't see other people using it in PvE really. Probably has potential in PvE because you can get your super back from blocking, receiving block damage, but I just, I really don't see much value in it. Next, we have Stronghold. For PvP, I give it an F, and PvE, I give it an F. It buffs your swords to the maximum efficiency. However, even though swords are good this season, I'm I'm probably gonna have to revisit it for PvE, but unless you're running a sword, I mean it's trash. And even though swords are very good, they're not good for all bosses. So Stronghold, I think it's situational for PvE. I'm gonna definitely have to revisit it. I still think it's F tier for PvP though. Even though swords allow you to three peak in PvP, it's just swords aren't like they're only good when someone's running towards you and you kill them from around a corner or something like that. Other than that, I think there are rockets with clusters that are better to take over a sword, and like hammerhead still exists, even though going into the future it's going to be sunsetted, but I believe that there's going to be other LMGs better, and like Truth and Warcliffe Coil better. options, and it also takes away from your kit because you are using it for your heavy, and heavy's not always available. You're better off using, Synthoceps or One-Eyed Mask over Stronghold for PvP activities. It just doesn't cut it. Next up we have, I believe it's pronounced Chitin's Ramparts. That's how I've just been saying it. I'm sorry if it's wrong. For PvP, I give it an A plus tier, and PvE, I give it an F. It's leaning on S tier, probably might just be flat A for PvP. Reason being, it lets you shoot through your barricade, although most people have probably adapted to this exotic by now, um, now that we're late into the season of its release. However, I still think it's very effective, especially in like pubs, like 6v6s, the classic mix or whatever. Can be good for catching people off guard. It's fun for like, meeting on people or sniping people through it because you're still technically safe through it. However, it reduces the effectiveness of your barricade, like its health. It makes it very easy to destroy. PvE, I really don't see the use of shooting through your barricade. I mean, it could be useful, but most ads are probably just going to nuke your shield anyways, so you're better off just using the normal variant of your barricade instead of using the uh, Chitin's Ramparts. And you're probably going to be using the Riot Barricade, so you get the increased reload instead of using the full wall barricade. So I don't really see the appeal for PvE. Next up, we have Crest of Alpha Lupi. PvP, I give it a C+, and PvE, I give it a C+. Probably could be higher for PvP, and maybe PvE. Reason I give it a C+ is that if you run like Bubble and you're wearing it, you generate 3 orbs, and those orbs give you a ton of super. And there's a thing you can do in 6v6 where you can just have constant bubbles up if all your teammates are running Bubble, and Crest of Alpha Lupi has like potential there. And putting up your barricade wall and having it heal you is pretty useful. But I mean, the only benefit you really get from PvP is putting up your barricades to heal you. It You only get the additional orb when you pop the super, and that's really for your teammates. And then you really have to bank on your teammates being good at using their supers and coming to your bubble to get the extra orbs. So it's dependent on your teammates, this exotic. And then for PvE, it can be helpful because you're giving your generally in PvE, people are smarter than in PvP. People are more likely to be in your bubble in PvE as well and to get the extra orbs so that they can get their super faster and start generating orbs for you so you can just get your super back faster. And then healing from your barricade can be very useful for getting yourself out of a pinch in PvE activities. However, I don't know. I just don't really use it. It's not like a go-to exotic for me, but it's definitely not trash, but it's not super good either. So yes, just sits at the C plus tier. Next up, we have Actium War Rig. I have it as a PvP B tier and a PvE B plus tier, mainly because it buffs autos and LMGs. It's pretty meta for, I think it's meta for Garden of Salvation's final boss if you're using Xenophage, because it will auto reload Xenophage, and Xenophage is a go-to option now, I believe, for DPS at the final boss for Garden of Salvation. Definitely, it can make your Suros very deadly in PvP, or even more deadlier, even more deadlier. Um, it can make Sweet Business pretty much like last forever in PvP as well as PvE. I just, I do think it's above average, but it's not like a tier pick for me because it only buffs your autos. It's not buffing your abilities or giving you healing or damage buffs or anything like that. Next up, we have Hollowfire Heart. PvP, I give it a B minus, and PvE, I give it an S tier. PvP, mostly B minus, not flat B, because you're probably not saving your super in PvP unless you're playing comp and you're like using your super as a shutdown super, as a counter to the enemy team supers. So not the best exotic. It can be useful for those who don't super a lot in PvP activities, so you constantly have good solar uptime on your abilities. However, it's just not very very strong for PvP because most of the time, as soon as you get your super, you're probably going to be using it, and using your super pretty much negates all the effects that Hollow Fire can offer you. But in PvE, it can be helpful because not all the time do you want to pop your super right away. Sometimes you're saving it for like good wave clearing and or boss damaging or whatever. So being able to have high uptime on your nades and your melee and your barricade can be very useful for the ins and outs of PvE activities. Next up, we have Armamentarium. For PvP, I have it as a D tier, and for PvE, I also have it as a D tier. I don't really think having an additional nade makes it very useful. I'm not really going to go in depth here. I just don't think having an extra grenade is very useful for PvP or PvE activities. I strongly believe there are better exotics available to you. Next up, we have Heart of Inmost Light. For PvP, I gave it a C tier, and for PvE, I gave it a D tier. Probably need to revisit this one because it does buff the ability damage of your other abilities when you use one ability. However, it's not like it's super great. I don't see a lot of people using it. Although I don't know, I do see a fair amount of people every now and then using it, but and people talk about it on the subreddit, the various Destiny subreddits. I've seen people talk about this exotic. Personally, don't use it. Don't find much value. Maybe I need to revisit this one. So definitely don't uh, immediately see the C and D tier and write it off. This exotic definitely has some potential. I just haven't used it a lot. I just haven't seen the potential. Next up, we have Severance Enclosure. For PvP, I gave it an F tier, and PvE, it's like a C question mark, kind of, probably just C at this point. Even with the buffs that they gave it this season, I just don't think it's useful. It requires you to run up, get a melee kill or like a finisher procced, and then you do creates like an explosion or something. It's just not good. I mean, in PvP, there's probably not going to be another person around while you're getting the melee kill, so the explosion's going to be pretty much useless. And then PvE, it's like I guess it's good for clearing like low tier, but I don't even know if it can kill low tier or not. Or I mean, definitely can't. I don't think it can kill mid tier ads like orange bars. So I don't know. I just don't think it's a good exotic. There are way better exotics to be using than this one. I mean, when it was released, it was considered like a meme, like a dead, useless exotic. So I mean, knowing Bungie's like ability to actually buff the meme exotics that come out, it's not looking good. Next up, we have Lion Rampant. I believe that's how you say that, Rampant. PvP, I give it a C tier, and PvE, I get a B plus tier. It does buff your in-air movement and allows you to shoot mid-air with your weapons when playing in PvP. Although I don't think it's something personally, I don't think it's something you're going to be doing a lot or all the time in PvP, but certainly has its uses. For PvE, it can be very useful for crossing large gaps. I know speedrunners use this exotic when they speedrun Spire of Stars. No, not Spire. Yeah, Spire Stars. Believe it's used for crossing the gaps in between the towers. But I don't know. Same thing as I've discussed like before in PvP guides. I think if you're in the air, you're an easy target for PvP and for PvE activities. Makes you very easy to kill. Definitely not a pick me exotic uh, for me to be using. Next up, we have Peacekeepers. PvP, I gave it a D tier, and PvE, I also gave it a D tier. Reason being, it forces you to play with SMGs. Not a lot of SMGs are very strong in this game, although Recluse exists. Recluse is still relatively strong for PvP activities and PvE activities. However, all it does is just like buff your SMG. So if you're not playing with an SMG, it's completely useless. So yeah, forces you to play with certain weapons, and if you don't have them and or you're not good at using them, it's just not a very good exotic. Next up, we have Doom Marchers, which received a significant buff this season, and I really, really like using these now. For PvP, gave it an S tier, if not triple S. Same for PvE, probably just like a triple S or something like that. Um, I just think it's a very fun and good exotic to use. I know I've written here not as good as Synthoceps, but I have updated it now. I should remove this. But the buff that I'm talking about that makes it better is they made it so it chains people up to like 20 meters. And that pretty much means you can chain people through walls and you can chain people through platforms in PvP. And for PvE, if you've ever messed around with them, like it's insane how far you can chain certain ads up from with the Doom Archer's ability. And it requires like no effort. I mean, you're always going to be sprinting in this game, sprinting or sliding. So your the charge for Doom Archers is always it's always going to be charged. So whenever you punch someone, you're always going to have the perk ready and available for the next fight and the next fight. So very solid exotic. Mark 44 Stanicides is up next. PvP gave it a C tier, and PvE I also gave it a C tier. Um, yeah, it's like a budget version of Skull Fort, kinda. Because it doesn't give you back your melee energy like guaranteed. It can't keep you alive, I suppose, when you're rushing at people with in PvP and PvE with your shoulder charge ability. Um, just I personally don't really like shoulder charge abilities in PvP and PvE activities. I know they like nuke people and they one shot, but even with the tracking changes, I don't know. Sometimes you can completely miss, and with like the hit registration in this game, sometimes it doesn't even register. Sometimes when you hit them, so it's really I personally don't like using the exotic because I don't like how shoulder charging, shoulder shield bashing, etc. works in this game. Next up, we have Antaeus Wards. PvP gave it a B tier, and PvE gave it an F tier. I think the glitchiness has been changed. You don't gain super energy anymore, I believe, when you reflect bullets or supers or whatever when you use it. Definitely you can gimp someone when they're in their super. If they like blade barrage you, you can slide to activate anti-air wards, and then the shield procs, and then it like I'm pretty sure you can bounce back the blades of blade barrage. And I mean I've been killed by people using this, but then it requires you to get the timing right, and if you're not timing your slides right, then it's effectively useless. And not you can't slide rapidly to have it proc. It's like every other slide, it's going to be procking. So you really got to understand the fundamentals of how to use this exotic in order to make it effective. That's why it's at a B tier, not an A tier, because, it requires like some degree of like uh, gimmicky type skill learning, if you will. Don't think it's like the greatest thing to be using in PvP, but definitely has a lot of uses to be had. PvE, don't think it's as effective. Really, it's probably not going to be doing much for you in PvE. I'm gonna just leave it at that. Next up, we have Peregrine Greaves. I'm not sure what's going on with this exotic. I haven't used it in a while. I mean, it will pretty much just like your shoulder charge will already one shot, but I don't know if you can one shot people out of their super with this still. Gonna have to revisit it for PvP, but main point is that I don't use these in PvP. I don't have never even seen other people this season use it in PvP, so most likely a dead exotic for PvP. However, for PvE, definitely has a potential because you can, even though it's been nerfed in PvE, you still can nuke certain ads, with Peregrine Greaves. Before it used to be you could just like nuke bosses doing it, but it has been nerfed because honestly that was quite stupid. But, might have to revisit this one. It's probably lower than A minus, probably like B now. It's definitely a okay exotic, I suppose, for taking into PvE. And then last but not least, we have Phoenix Cradle. For PvP, gave it a D tier, and PvE gave it an A tier. PvP, mostly it's at a D tier because it forces you to play a certain super, and if you don't like playing with that super, it might be useless. The sunspots can be useful, but your teammates have to know that for one, you're using Phoenix Cradle, and two, they have to understand how sunspots work and how they buff their damage. And but then, players have to run to your sunspots to get use out of them, and enemies might not be nearby your sunspots, so it it's very, very situational, using this exotic with the hammer super. However, for PvE, I do believe it's a lot better. I was enlightened recently, well, not recently, but a while ago when I was playing Scourge of the Past, and in the boss phase, someone was using Phoenix Cradle because we didn't have, I think I was the only well, or we had two wells, but we didn't have a third well, and pretty much the third well, air quotes, was the Titan using Phoenix Cradle. He would just throw sunspots on the ground and at the boss. And if you stand in the sunspot, your damage is buffed, similar to like the well. So it's like a budget well, if you will. So it definitely has a very high potential in PvE. You just have to understand how to use the sunspots, and your teammates have to understand that they can use the sunspots as well. And that concludes the exotic armor tier list for Titans and the entirety of the exotic armor pieces. And hopefully in the next season they'll add 3 more pieces to Warlock, Hunter, and Titan. Probably will just make a short video discussing all 3 of them and how what I think of them, my opinions, etc. And in the next video, I'm thinking of making a Gambit guide or like Gambit Prime guide. I've been playing Gambit recently. I've noticed there's a lot of people who still don't understand the mechanics of the game, even though I'm pretty sure the game gives you tooltips on how to play, but there's no like tutorial really. And I've just had some weird matches playing Gambit, so I think that might be the next video. But if you do have any ideas for topics I should cover, please leave a comment in the comment section below. I will definitely read your topic idea and I guess get back to you and see if that's a topic I might discuss in the future. I know I'm kind of rambling here, but I saw that a lot of people really like the distribution guide that I made in my PvP guide for Destiny 2. There's a lot of returning players and new players who just, don't understand like the new mechanics. And at the time, I guess I didn't really realize that was something so foreign to some people. So if there are similar topics like the armor distributions that you guys, whoever's watching these videos, or my subs, my 16 subs, that you're confused about, definitely comment about what you're confused about, and I will happily make a video or a guide or get back to you about that topic. And anyways, thanks for watching my video. See you guys in the next one.